I'm just going to build on some of the things that Linda said, many of which I agree with. I do want to give the U.S. government some credit. I've been incredibly frustrated by the pace of moving people out of ironically named Camp Liberty, which is essentially a jail. But they are being moved, and I'm glad of that. It's just that this should have been done 4 years ago. And so, you know, some of this is bureaucratic bungling. Some of it is the fact that there are other things on the plate of the American government. My major goal here is to get the remaining 1,000 or so people out of Liberty into safety. And that is our job. And the truth is that the people at Liberty did America a service and saved American lives during the Second American War in Iraq. And I think we owe them something for that. And the other thing is that we've promised them numbers of times things. And the Iranian government is famous for promising things and then not delivering. I'd hate to put the United States government in that same category. And I don't want to see that. I, with Linda, believe that human rights ought to be an incredibly important part of our foreign policy. And we can do better, and we need to do better, and we need to do it quickly, because every life that is lost at Liberty is a life that's being lost not just because of the bad behavior of the Shia militias and the Iranian influence in Iraq, but it's a life that's lost because of American dithering. And I think we're a better country than that, and I think our government is a better government than that, and I think we need to do more, and we need to do it quickly. So I want to give credit where credit's due, but I wish a lot more credit were due, because I'm not proud of the way this has been handled. I do want to say a couple of nice things about Hillary, however, since I am a Hillary partisan. One of the reasons I ended up supporting Hillary was because I think that she's facts-driven, and my imagination, although obviously I wasn't in the room, of what happened in the court cases was the bureaucrats of the State Department dithered and dithered and dithered and didn't obey the judge's ruling. And finally, Hillary said, "We have 5 days left. Come and give me your evidence." And when they couldn't produce it, Hillary just called them on it and said, pull the case and take the designation away. So I have a different interpretation. I think Hillary probably wasn't paying that much attention to it, given the scope of the reach of the Secretary of State. And when she found her own staff was trying to pull the wool over her eyes and a lot of other people's eyes, she put a stop to it. I hope that's the interpretation. I think that is the interpretation. I think Hillary's going to be a lot tougher than President Obama on rogue nations, and we're not just talking about Iran. Whether she's going to be tough enough, we'll see, but I think she's going to be a whole lot tougher. I think if she ever draws a red line, I can pretty much assure you that if somebody steps over it, something's going to happen, because I think she understands that red lines should not be drawn unless you intend to enforce them, because if you don't, then you lose the entire credibility of any further leverage that you have in those relationships. Let me just talk a little bit about the regime. I thought the last panel was absolutely terrific, and Bob Torricelli I thought was great, and I was particularly pleased when he came up afterwards and said he actually was just using all my ideas, and it was really good. So no, but I did agree with a lot of the things he had to say. And the one thing I think that, and then I'm going to make my last point is going to be about the opposition, around the opposition. But the one thing that I thought that Bob said that I really agreed with in the Reese-Torricelli law argument is that I think this regime is doomed. It's just a matter of how long it takes. My model for what Iran is going to look like is Venezuela. And the reason is you can't run an economy if it's corrupt. And the fact is the Iranian economy is essentially run by the IRGC. They are corrupt. It's what's destroying Egypt's economy. It's run by the army. And you can't, economies don't work. The Soviet Union proved that centralized economies don't work, and corrupt economies work even worse. And the Venezuelan people, who I'll admit are starving in part because of the price of oil, but they're starving because they have a completely incompetent, repressive, corrupt government that has no interest in its own people. And that describes the government of Iran right now. And that kind of a government is going to collapse. You can only repress for so long until the natural cycle of desire for freedom among all human beings, which we all share, no matter what background and culture we come from, eventually takes over. So I think this government is doomed, and we'd like to help it along on its path to doomsday as fast as we possibly can. We have our own interests. I thought it was a great discussion in the last panel about what our interests were and how complicated they are and how they intersect with all kinds of things. I'd like to see human rights higher up on the interest list and have it affect our policy more specifically. The last thing I want to say is I thought, when I first came to Paris, I think it was 7 years that we've been doing this now together, I was really pleased, and the most important document I read, which I think is still the most important document of the resistance, is the 10 points that Madame Rajavi laid out. That could be the constitution of any country in the world that an American would approve of, that a human rights advocate would approve of. Equal rights for women, freedom of religion. It was an extraordinary, it's still an extraordinary document. And I think that any group, whether it's in Iran or Zimbabwe, we have somebody from Zimbabwe here today, or any nation that lives under authoritarian rule with disregard for human rights, that document is a document that any of them should be proud to use as a model for what they ought to believe in. And I think the United States should talk to anybody with the kinds of principles that were laid out in that document that I saw for the first time 7 years ago. That's what we believe. That's what America believes countries should strive for. And we're not there either. I mean, we talk about the 2,500 executions in Iran. We've had about 20 ourselves. I mean, I'm now convinced that we ought to give up the death penalty, not because 20 people is a low number, but if you're going to try to make the world a better place, I think you have to have the state set its own example. The current regime is going in the wrong direction, and they stand for everything that's evil and bad about humanity, and that means it's our job to make sure they don't succeed, and the faster we get them out of there, the better.
Thank you.